Ryan from Bolin Development here. Let's take a quick look at primitive data types. Hang on just a second. I know I just hit you with a wall of data, but just know this is going to be the most intimidating thing in today's course. What we really care about is over here in the left column, but it can be really helpful to see the sizes and ranges of these data types. Today, we're going to be talking about integers and floats, that is, whole numbers and decimal numbers. We will cover other primitive data types, but we're going to do that in a later video. Let's just focus on these two today. So this lesson wouldn't be complete without going over some examples, right? I want to break down a few simple uses of primitive data types so you can see how they're assigned and created. And then I would like to show you a couple common pitfalls that you can run into, especially when moving back and forth between integer and float numbers, as well as some strange things in Java, or they seem strange at first, about how floats and doubles don't really play nice together. So let's take a look at that. First, I'm going to start with int. Remember that byte and short are going to be smaller than int, and I just want to work with integer numbers. That's typically where I start. You can use the other two if you want to save that data, but for what we're doing right now, they're assigned the same way, they're created the same way, so I'm just going to work with ints, right? So whenever I want to use an int, I need to use the Java keyword int, which is telling Java to expect that an integer number is coming. And then I can assign that a variable name, right? So in this case, if I were talking about fruits, like say on my kitchen table, I have 10 fruits. I can put that in there. You'll see there's no issue, no red highlights or anything going on in IntelliJ. This is grayed out because we've created a variable called fruits, but we're not using it to do anything, right? So IntelliJ is just letting us know, like, hey, that's there, but you're not doing anything with it, right? Another way that we can do this is, say you have, this integer fruits. You can just create the variable, and then you can actually assign it later, right? So I could then say fruits, set the value of fruits to 10, okay? And so that's essentially what this statement is saying, is create me a variable of the integer type called fruits, and then assign the number 10 to that, right? For this, we'll assign them all on the same line just so that we can keep everything together and really easily readable. Now, we could go look at a long. A long is just double an integer. So if you get how integers work, you fundamentally understand how bytes, shorts, and longs work, because they're just different sizes of the same whole number idea, right? It's just different sized containers to put your numbers in. Floats are going to be different because float numbers have decimals, right? So one of the things that is really interesting about this is I could take something like a double, right? And I could say double fruits, and I could put the number 10 in there, right? Now I already have a fruits, so we'll call this one, fruits again, right? So I could go ahead and put a whole number inside a double, and it doesn't have a problem with that because it's essentially representing it as 10.0. No harm, no foul. What I cannot do is go to an integer and then add something like this. You'll see I get a red squiggly line. It's going to tell me in IntelliJ that, hey, the required type was integer, but you provided a double, right? And so I can correct that. Another thing to watch out for is if I had tried to assign this as a float, it's fine here, but you'll notice when I do add the decimal, I'm getting an error. That's because Java is a strongly typed language. And what I mean by that is that it uses data types to make sure that you're not doing erroneous things with your data, like putting a number in a box that it's too small for, or putting a whole number where a decimal should go, or a decimal where a whole number should go. It wants to make sure that if you want to do that, that you have to explicitly let Java know. Everything about Java is pretty explicit, and it wants you to type it out exactly how it wants you to type it out. And we call that strong typing, right? I don't mean typing like this, I mean data types, right? So what we want to do is instead, we don't just want to change this to a double because we can use a float, and a float should fit in there. All we have to do is put an F after this, and you'll see that the error goes away. That's because what we're essentially doing is forcing Java. We're casting this number and telling Java, hey, I want this to actually be a float, and I've signified that now, and so there's no issue, right? Some careful things to watch out for here. Let's say we add these two numbers together. Right, I just do a simple, addition problem where I say fruits plus fruits again, and I'm just printing that out to the console. Let's see what happens. So I run it and we get 20.6, which is what we were expecting, right? Some things that we want to be careful about is if we are essentially casting this into a variable. So if I did something like this, and I said int total, and I added this same math problem right here, now IntelliJ is smart enough to know that I've messed up, right? Some IDEs that you're in, most IDEs should handle this. This is old Java, so this should definitely be handled in most IDEs. But if you're using some online IDE or you're using, some kind of freeware, it may not. But here, when you run this, you're going to hit an error because it's basically going ahead and telling you, when you add these two together, I'm going to have to put this decimal and then put this down here. This isn't going to work, right? It's like you're trying to take an integer and a float and add them together and store it in an int, right? So I could go and do a float and then print that out and no problem. It's just remembering that the reason that error is there is because you can't put any kind of decimal number into an integer, including when you're doing math with it. Now, we'll go over plenty more examples in the future as we start to code more in this video series, and we'll break down a lot of this stuff. I'm going to break down variables and how that works. So if you don't totally understand what you see on screen right now, that's okay. We're just getting started. So appreciate you for hanging out today, seeing what we're talking about with primitive data types. As we move forward, we'll get more and more sophisticated, and I can't wait to learn with you. Thanks for stopping by.